Hi, everyone. Welcome to this broadcast. Mark DeJesus here today, bringing you insights for your healing and freedom journey. Today, I want to get into a subject regarding your parents. And I want to ask you this question. As you're working through your healing and freedom journey, do you realize that your parents might have been emotionally immature? Today, I want to give you 12 signs of emotionally immature parents. And I believe that this could help you understand what has been flowing down in your generations and what has impacted you in your own life, especially when it comes to your emotional development. As I teach, many of us have to understand that our parents set the grid for how we relate to God, how we relate to ourselves, and how we develop our emotions and our way of coping and responding to life. And so this is so fundamental in how our mental health forms in life. You know, I was reading a quote on social media, kind of made me chuckle, but at the same time makes us grimace. The quote said, "Adulthood is really discovering that half of your family is mentally ill." And some of you might say, well, it's a lot more than that percentage in my family. Maybe that's the case. But as you enter into adulthood, you start to realize more and more what was wonderful, but also what was dysfunctional, downright wrong, and what was immature in the emotional life of your family growing up, because many, many people were raised by parents who were emotionally immature. And when we talk about mental health, we're talking about emotional health, how to deal with emotions properly, how to know what we're feeling, how to work through them, how to navigate that in the context of relationships. Were you given that? And your emotional development stems from, at the beginning, your parental relationship. So let's get into this. I'm going to give you 12 signs that you had emotionally immature parents. The first one, right at the top of the list, is they do not know how to deal with their own emotions. We are effective parents in parenting our children when we can navigate with them through their emotions because we ourselves have worked through and are continuing to work through our own emotions. But right at the top, emotionally immature parents, they've not dealt with their own emotions. They don't have an emotional grid. They may have low emotional intelligence to know what they're feeling, why they're feeling it, and how to process through it. Now, just because you have high intellect, you may have had a parent that had a high intellect, but a low emotional intelligence. So you can have a high IQ and a low EI, meaning a high intellectual intelligence level and a low emotional intelligence level. And you may have had that too in your own journey, in your own experience. The point being is parents who know how to navigate their own emotions can better help their children navigate through theirs. The second thing is they don't know how to deal with their own brokenness, their flaws and mistakes. They have a lot of don't go there and a lot of territories in their emotions and in their thinking. So they're uncomfortable with vulnerability. They don't like to admit their mistakes. They don't like to talk about the past or talk about issues in their journey. They live it a lot. They live a lot in denial. And so because of that, they're defensive. They can be dismissive about emotions and sensitive subjects. They can deflect. They can blame others. So they have very little to offer you. And so how they live and how they present themselves as a parent, what this does is it causes you to dismiss your own pain. So now you're moving on where they haven't dealt with their own brokenness and vulnerability and flaws. So they don't pass that down to you. And this is a key component of development, of how to look at the goofy, sinful, struggling, suffering, just challenging areas of our life. And a mature parent is going to help us look at those areas with grace, with compassion, and with some coping tools that are helpful in navigating those areas. An emotionally immature parent doesn't know how to do that. Number 3, they are uncomfortable with emotions and they avoid emotions. So for many of them, the worst thing that you could say to them is, how does that make you feel? It doesn't lead to good conversations. Many, many parents who are emotionally immature have trapped up trauma and pain in their minds and their hearts and their bodies that is just ready to erupt at any time. So when you dig into vulnerability, when you dig into the past or you're dealing with struggle, they like to they leave the conversation, they like to change the subject, they may just walk away or they just get angry. Many times they have a blank look on their face. They don't know how to engage these subjects effectively. They are uncomfortable with certain emotions in their own life. So they are uncomfortable with you talking about emotions. They can't identify their emotions. They don't know how to do that. They don't know how to go there. They may go off in anger, and you might think they're very emotional, but they're actually not really able to identify and work through their own emotions. So they avoid deeper conversations. And talking about these vulnerable areas really make them uncomfortable. So they don't know how to help you as a child growing up in your own development. Number 4 is a big one. They have low empathy. They're emotionally insensitive. So as a test, when a problem is brought to them, what do? When you express how you feel, what is their response? Are they dismissive about it? Is it kind of a get over it response all the time? Watch. And now here's another test that I find if you want to see, because empathy is a key component in emotional development. The ability to compassionately see someone's situation because you put yourself in their shoes. You don't make it about yourself, but you find ways to connect, to put yourself in their shoes, and it allows you to connect compassionately. It's an amazing trait, and it's something we all need to be able to cultivate in relationships. Here's a test. When you listen to them talk about other people's problems, what's their default setting? Is it always judgment? Is it very judgy and dismissive? Or is it compassionate and gracious? Now, we all have our moments. You watch the news and, these people, and then we do, it happens. But I'm talking about on a regular basis and how they look at other people. Is it dismissive? Is it judgy? Is it constantly lack compassion? And also too, they're not self-aware of their own struggles. So they judge others and haven't recognized their own issues. So they're blind to themselves. These kind of people are terrible listeners. So they're not someone you could sit down and share of yourself with because you don't feel safe. Number 5 is they only address something when it becomes a red light issue. And what I mean by this is like a major crisis. Now, when you drive down the street and you see the traffic lights, there's green light, there's yellow light, there's red light. Yellow is a light of warning, slow, caution, be aware, right? And emotionally immature parents, I ran into this a lot in pastoral ministry. You could see them all over the place. They only respond when it's a big crisis moment, a red light kind of moment. I remember this happening over and over again. All of a sudden, like when I was a youth pastor, there were certain parents that just never engaged, weren't interested. They weren't interested in their kids participating or anything like that, which, okay, you do what you got to do. But then whenever there was a crisis, who are they calling? They're calling me. Mark, my son's smoking pot. I need your help, right? To this day, I get those kind of emails. Help, I need help now, right? It's a red light response. But going back to parenting, parents are like, oh, my daughter's pregnant, or my son's in jail. Those are the only times they react. And you instinctively ask yourself in your mind, where have you been this whole time? What's been going on? Someone doesn't just get pregnant overnight. Someone doesn't start smoking pot overnight. Someone doesn't end up in jail just overnight out of nowhere. There's a process and a journey. What's going on in the family? What's going on in your life? But emotionally immature parents, they only react to red light scenarios. They don't see warning signs. They don't deal with things. They're not aware of what's happening because they're not emotionally in tune with what's going on. And I can pick up an emotionally immature parent when they approach me. They say, Mark, my kid's got this problem. Can you help him? Like, what does that even mean? And then I began to ask him, what are you doing? Well, I need you to work with him. Or sometimes they go, can you fix him? I heard you can fix people. Or can you fix this situation? They just want me to take this issue, put it in a nice bow, wrap it up, and make it all go away. They're just crisis reactors. They just want life to go back to the way it was before. And a lot of family problems make them look bad. So that's why this red light thing causes a knee-jerk reaction, and then they just want to go back to life the way it was before. And they ignore all the yellow lights. In fact, emotionally immature spouses, they ignore all the warning signs in their marriage that things aren't going well, and all of a sudden the spouse is like, I'm moving out, and I'm done, and I can't take this anymore. And they're like, what are you talking about? This is the kind of stuff that I'm speaking of when I speak of emotional immaturity. Number 6, they teach you distorted perceptions about emotions. Things like, hey, boys don't cry. You're too emotional. Or you're so weak. You're too sensitive all the time. Or they may say, the past is the past. Why do we have to talk about it? It creates limitations in how to deal with emotions. Or maybe you even get some kind of religious twistedness, shaming you. Jesus doesn't like it when you act that way, or whatever kind of things get communicated in an emotionally immature home. You gain a lot of distortions out of that, or that you can't have flaws, you can't make mistakes. You got to do everything just right. Number 7 is they shame you. They say things like, what's the matter with you? What's wrong with you? And it quite often makes you feel stupid. You feel stupid, you feel dumb, so you often suppress things and hide things. And what's important to understand is when a parent is constantly shaming their child, they are emotionally abandoning the child. Did you catch it? When you're constantly shaming a child, you are emotionally abandoning that child. So it creates this massive abandonment wound in their development. Number 8 is they take out their emotional issues on you as a child. So while every parent, loses their cool, every parent gets upset, every parent goes through stress, every parent has their days, right? But as a chronic pattern, their fears and their angers that really have to do with their own unhealed childhood wounds, they're taking it out on you. So they snap at you constantly, and they don't take responsibility for it. Number 9 is they redirect conversations back to themselves because they're emotionally incapable of being able to engage in a healthy back and forth. And this brings up the problem of chronic narcissism because many of you were raised by a narcissist or 2 narcissists, and that's very, very challenging. It requires a lot of understanding and healing. And one of the things that they do is they take every conversation, every scenario, they turn it back to themselves. So no wonder there's no emotional development. You are left neglected in this because in every story, they are projecting themselves as the biggest victor or the biggest victim, whichever is going to serve them at the appropriate moment. So if you have something going bad, they're like, oh, man, you think that's bad. When I was constantly going through those kind of patterns because they're preoccupied and lost in themselves in such an unhealthy way. Number 10, when dealing with conflict or deeper issues, they react in childlike ways. Not only do they make it about themselves, but many children feel like when they're talking to their parents, it's in certain scenarios, it's like talking to a child. Now, a lot of times I'm talking about grown-up adult children talking to their parents, right? Trying to have a conversation over a conflict or issues. And it's like suddenly your parent turns into a 12-year-old and they shut down, they pout, they turn into like an infant. They start using childish ways of relating. They mock you. They create disdain. It's like another person takes over because that's the immature aspects of their life now manifesting. And because of that creates a lot of damage. And so that aspect of their journey wasn't able to parent you. And so you may have felt that you needed to be the grown up. And you need to be the grown up in every situation and carry the burden of this. And it's an ungodly burden for you to carry because the burden of your parents' healing and growth is not on your shoulders. Did you hear me, folks? The burden of your parents' healing and growth is not on you as their child's shoulders. Whether you're a child, at age, a teenager, or a grown adult, many grown adults are carrying the weight of their parents' undeveloped, unhealed, lack of growth, lack of maturity. They're carrying that on their shoulders. And it's not meant for you to carry. But emotional immaturity growing up will cause the burden many times to get put back on you because you think everything's your fault and you feel this sense of blame. Number 11 is one of the biggest ones of this is the neglect that is left. You become emotionally neglected, mainly because they are lost in themselves. They're lost in the inner chaos that they haven't been able to work out in their life. So they're very self-focused and they have nothing to give you and nothing to offer because they're not experiencing healing in their own life. Number 12 is an emotionally immature parent is going to leave you with a loud inner critic. And I've said this before in other broadcasts, the inner critic is the voice of your parents in the unhealed, broken areas of your emotional life. Next time you hear yourself beating yourself up or criticizing yourself, listen to it for a second. Whose voice does it sound like? Does it sound like mom? Does it sound like dad? Or does it sound like both of them? Because in that, you shame yourself. You become at war with yourself because that is what emotional immaturity leaves us with. And they're so lost in themselves, you get neglected. You're left in a war amongst yourself. And there's many narcissists that are so self-focused and so lost in themselves. Whenever you're around them, they want you to think highly of them. An emotionally healthy parent, an emotionally mature parent, is going to instill in you mindsets and interactions that make you feel more empowered about you. You see, unhealthy people want you to walk away thinking great about them. Healthy people want you to walk away and think better about you because their heart is to bless you, to leave an imprint of blessing on your life. Because when we see ourselves in a healthy way, that love flows right out through to others, and we give out to others. Our focus is to bless others. Emotionally immature people are about self-survival. Now, if you feel like you want to take a next step in this, I read a book that I found to be very informative, very, very insightful. It takes a deep dive on the subject of adult children of immature parents. This is written by Lindsay Gibson and is a very popular book. She's not a Christian author from what I know, but the insights of family patterns are very, very helpful. I found a lot of it to be very, very, very helpful in covering this subject. So if this has been a blessing to your life, you could consider getting that book. I'll put a link to that in the show notes so that you can go ahead and get a copy of that and walk through that. I think it'll be a blessing to your life and your journey. Well, I took my own journey with you today about emotional immaturity. If this has been a blessing to you, would you consider a one-time donation or become a regular supporter to the ministry work of teaching people to experience healing and freedom in mental, emotional, and relationship health? Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in future broadcasts, Lord willing. And the creek don't rise. It's your brother from another mother saying I'm out.